Welcome, everyone. I am so excited for this session. My name is Jen Holness. I am incredibly pleased to be here to moderate this session, Being Seen, Black Communities, Directives for Creating Authentic and Inclusive Content. Now, what you have to understand is that the Being Seen report are the product of a consultation conducted by the Black Screen Office with Black people of color, 2SLGBTQIA+, and people with disability members of the industry, the public, all across Canada. So this is a national study that we've done. The research was supported by funding from Telefilm Canada, the Shaw Rocket Fund, Bell Fund, Ontario Creates, CBC, Real Canada, Out TV, and Creative BC. So lots of big players who supported us. The consultations themselves resulted in key directives that we really want to share with the industry, and they're meant to be used by everyone in the creative and decision-making process in Canadian film, television, and interactive digital media, to educate ourselves and to develop strategies for change, and to enact real, long-lasting, systemic transformation. The first report, the Core Themes report, was released in February, followed by the Children Media Report in March, then the report for people of color. We weren't joking, we are like doing something comprehensive here. And today we are very, very excited to launch the report that focuses on the Black community. Hence, you see all kinds of Black people on your screen. So we have brought together this panel with Kellyanne Ashton, who is our lead researcher on the project, as well as 5 veterans to talk about their experiences and how the directives can be used as a tool to improve authenticity in our content in Canada. So now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce all the other folks on this panel with me. That includes Kellyanne Ashton, who is, again, the lead researcher of Being Seen, and who has worked tirelessly, I mean this, on this project with Joan, our fearless and wonderful leader of the BSO. On the panel, besides Kellyanne, Lynne, is Ngardy Conteh George. Ngardy is a wonderful, award-winning filmmaker, director, and producer. Her films include the TV hour Mr. Jane and Finch for CBC, which won 2 2020 Canadian Screen Awards, plus her feature-length documentary, The Flying Stars. Ngardy hails from Sierra Leone, and she is a co-founder of the Oya Media Group and the Oya Black Arts Collection. She's here with us, recovering from COVID. So yay, thank you, Ngardy. Next, we have Anthony Q. Farrell. I always have to remember the Q. Anthony is a writer and showrunner who we are very proud to claim. And I mean this because, you know, he could work anywhere in the world, and he's here. He recently was named as Playback and WGC Showrunner of the Year. He has written in productions in Canada, the US, and the UK. His credits include The Office, Overlord and the Underwoods, Secret Life of Boys, The Parker Andersons, and Amelia Parker. Next is Kevin Hanchard. Kevin is a super talented actor of stage and television. He is known for roles in Orphan Black, The Expanse, which, by the way, I watched the entire series recently. Thank you very much. And he is currently stars in Hudson and Rex as Superintendent Joseph Donovan. On stage, he has worked as a regular both in Stratford and the Shaw Festival. Then there is Melanie Nicholls-King, who I call my sister. She is a super talented actress and producer working both north and south of the border, although I think she's down there a lot more these days. Melanie is known for playing Cheryl in the dramatic series The Wire, which I think everybody in the world has seen. She has also on the Canadian side been a series regular in Rookies Blues. She is known for Anne with an E, Billions, and Little Fires Everywhere. And last, but certainly not least, is the wonderful Charles Officer, who is a Jamaican-Canadian writer, director, and a former professional hockey player. He's all Canadian, he's got it all. Charles has worked over the last 20 years in the industry, and he has produced and directed incredible work, including the most recent The Porter, which just launched in the US when I was down in LA last week. There was big rumblings about it. And I love the show, by the way. I have two more to catch up on and then I'm done. Love the show. He's also the the director and writer of Akila's Escape, which was released in 2020 and won a shared Canadian Screen Award for Best Original Screenplay. There's a lot more, but we don't have that much time. So I'm gonna move forward and I'm gonna pass this over to Kelly Lynne to briefly set the stage of how the study came about and how the research was conducted. Kelly Lynne?
Thank you, Jen. And I will be brief because we want to get to the voices, which is what this report is all about. As Jen mentioned, it was inspired by Imaginative's Protocols and Pathways Guide for working with Indigenous stories, communities, creators. And after reading it and being blown away by it, I wanted to have something similar for other underrepresented groups. Telefilm agreed. Telefilm asked me to work with the newly created Black Screen Office. So that's how it came about. And we had focus groups and interviews with over 400 people from the Black, people of color, 2S LGBTQIA plus, and people with disability communities. But we also took an intersectional approach so that people could choose which part of their identity they wanted to talk about, both in terms of choosing their focus groups, but also in the conversation. So they could bring all of themselves. We didn't ask people to tick a box because that's part of what we're trying to fight against is ticking boxes. And what they kept saying to us is that they wanted to see complexity. They wanted to see all of themselves reflected in the television and the films and the video games that they watch and play with. So it really worked well. And because we structured it that way, we got so much honesty and emotion and tears and anger. And that's what we structured the reports with a lot of quotes to try to communicate that so that it's as if you were sitting there in the focus groups with us, and then brought their voices together to create the directives. And the directives, there's a few do this, don't do that, but they're mostly asking people to think about things they probably haven't thought of before, to give them guidance as they're interacting with other communities. And this is meant for everybody, because at some point you're going to be dealing with a community that you don't belong to, even if it's within the larger umbrella of the Black communities. And that's one of the things that we heard a lot about, is this idea that the Black community is not one thing. It is many different things. And especially when you compare the Canadian Black communities to American, we have so much more diversity up here in terms of origin, countries of origin, the recent immigration, the shifting immigration patterns, where at one point it was all, it was dominated by Jamaica and Haiti, and now we're getting much more immigration coming from Western Africa, for example. So that, and we also have, and this is one of the things that surprised me when I discovered it, the 3 top growing Black communities in Canada are Lethbridge, Alberta, Moncton, New Brunswick, and Ottawa. And that's because of African immigration. That's where they're going. Those are stories we're not hearing, we're not seeing. So this is what people kept saying to us, is the complexity of our community is not being seen. The stories from these communities are not being seen, and that's what we want.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kelly Lynne. And you're absolutely right. I know that in our conversations, the VSO, by the way, as people should know, we're a year old. And it's incredible that in a year's time, we were able to put together this comprehensive study that really tries to understand and reflect on what it is like for Black Canadians and also the stories of Black Canadians. And you made an incredibly important point that we are from all over the world. Our stories are different, but we are painted in a monolith. And we also get so much African-American stories. So in the report, we dived into stats in terms of the composition of Black communities in Canada and how they differed in the US. And so one of the things I wanted to ask is, because we get so much of our content from the US, and it doesn't actually deal with the multiplicity of sort of Black immigration experience in Canada. Do you think that this kind of difference, the multiplicity of Black stories, do you think that there's finally a recognition of this? And in your experience, are we starting to understand, or are we starting to write about or create content around this experience? So I'm gonna turn to you, Anthony, and to you, Gabby, to ask you, is it changing? Are we finally starting to embrace these kinds of Black stories? And what can we do as creators to accelerate embracing more of these kinds of stories?
Do you want to go first, Getty, or? I think for me, I always hate saying things are getting better. They are getting a little better. That's not saying we're where we need to be, not even close. But I think, and I talk about this, quite a bit recently, like because of the martyrdom of George Floyd, there are more ears open now, right? There are more people willing to have conversations, to listen to the idea that there are these other voices that have been silenced because of the system that we're in. And you see things happening now with the CBC Relief Fund, and Crave is opening their doors to more things. And I think you're going to start seeing more stories coming at you that are different than what you have had before. Like Revenge of the Black Best Friend. You've got Virgins coming out. There are a few other ones that I've heard from other creators that I probably can't talk about yet, but I know that they're in the pipeline and they're coming. They're coming eventually. The thing that for me, I'm just kind of always being cautious about it, is that we need to make sure that those shows are getting the support budget-wise that shows that are mostly white are getting, right? Like, I think it's one thing to kind of give a show that has mostly a white cast like $1.5 million for a comedy per episode, and then say, hey, cool, that's great, and then turn around and give a show on Gem or some other streamer, here's $75,000, make 8 episodes, right? Like, I think that's one of the things that I think is going to be the next, you're giving us more stuff, more areas and more things than we had before, but when you're in a desert and someone gives you a sip of water, you're going to be thankful you got that sip, but what's up with that glass over there, right? I think that's kind of a place where we're at right now, in at least from what I'm seeing.
Got you. So what about you, Gaddy? I mean, you're primarily from a documentary point of view, but are you seeing more of that multiplicity of Black stories being told, being commissioned? Is that happening? And what are what do you think needs to be in place to have more of that happening?
I mean, I think I agree with a lot of what Anthony was saying. On the documentary end, I think, with Finding Sally coming out last year, that was, East African, Canadian, perspective. And I think there are more projects coming down the pipeline. I think, summer 2020, murder of George Floyd, that has accelerated. So it'll be really interesting to see what is coming down the pipeline. I know a lot of projects were put into development. I only hope that they are fully funded and receiving equal funding, and not everything is just hopping on CBC Gem, but things are going to the major network as well and getting the full funding. I think a lot for documentary, where I think a lot of the shift is happening, is who is telling the stories. Because with documentary, I feel like there have been lots of stories been told on the continent, but who was telling those stories and what perspective is being centered in telling those stories? And I don't think that always comes from centers, from people from our communities. And so I'm hoping to see that change, and I'm hoping to see more of that being questioned, the authorship, the connection to community by the creators. And I hope that that's questioned more and scrutinized more, and only projects that have that proper connection to the community, the authentic connection to the community, are the ones that are greenlit in the realm of documentary. It's so important that who tells the story just as much as it's important of what stories are being told. And I think that's really important for that space. I think I've seen a notice, a difference, like with our emerging filmmakers program. I'd say a lot of our participants come from such a variety of Black communities. We have such a mixture of Black Canadians who've been here for generations, and those who immigrated from the Caribbean, those from African countries, who are recent immigrants, who were born here and their parents were immigrants. And I think there's such a variety right now. And I think I've seen it a lot, I think, in British television with like I May Destroy You and Sex Education. You're seeing characters who are immigrants from the continent, and all the nuances of what that means plays out within their character. It's not just slapping on a Jamaican accent on someone and that's all you get to get that like experience of immigrants, which normally is the way that I think presents itself from a lot from American programming. So I'm just hoping that we see like, what is that, the Blackety talk show, I believe, on CBC Gem, and I believe it's sisters, and I think they're come from an African immigrant family. So I'm hoping that we just constantly see more and more of this, and that it's backed up with the proper funding to compete at the same level of other programming that exists.
Truer words have not been said by both of you, and I want to emphasize, as a producer, writer, and director myself, that funding piece. One of the things I've seen happening, is that there's an acknowledgement that our stories should be told, but there's not the same kind of willingness to invest into telling it, and also to actually maybe even put things into the newer filmmakers, and then for some of the more senior filmmakers who are making larger projects, how do you get those projects off the ground too? So those are some of the things that I think you're communicating about. But in some ways, you sort of answered some of my second question, which is essentially that Canada has many different Black communities. So for example, the Nova Scotian Black community has a different experience than, let's say, some of the Ontario Black communities. There's also a huge Asian population in Montreal. As you mentioned, East Africans are taking up space in Ottawa and in Alberta, and all that kind of a thing. Now, how do you think we get these stories told by these different Black filmmakers from these different communities? And here's the other thing: how do you get around the question of audience? Because what's always being told, what's always being said, is that there's not an audience necessarily for that kind of a Black story. That's what's kept sort of like that criminal gangster storyline going for so long, because there's been a sense that that's the kind of thing that will, entice an audience. How do we get these different stories told? And do you think, how do we reach that broader Canadian audience? I'm going to ask Charles, who, you've recently done The Porter, to talk about how do we get even your story, The Porter, for example, it's a historical Black story. And we were told, we don't want to see these Black history stories. Let's do these modern stories. So how can you reach it to the audience? What are the strategies? What are your thoughts on that? And Melanie, I'd also love to get your thoughts about this as well.
Yeah, it has been a challenge, just speaking specifically about The Porter and how it came to be realized. It's, the conversation has constantly been within this colonial sort of structure that we exist in, that our stories have not had been validized, or there's been people who want to watch our stories or reflections of ourselves, and we've been calling for it. There is a massive population, but we're talking about things that are also kind of broken up into two spaces, I think. And there's like the industry and sort of commercialism and capitalism, and how this industry has been structured, which is a mechanism that involves, that requires, again, like, the BSO coming together and ensuring that this sort of information is relayed to broadcasters too, because it all affects the trickle effect of who's hired and who's actually, looking at material and understanding the audience that it may speak to. That's constantly the issue of the disconnect, is that we're presenting stories from the diaspora that are foreign to individuals. At the same time, when we're putting this work out there, it's taken a good 10 plus years to put The Porter out, but then we need the involvement, we need to engage, we do that heavy lifting, but we need engagement from the community when these sort of pieces come out. We can't just sit on them and assume that, because one project came out, that suddenly everyone's transformed and there's going to be a floodgate of more. There's still the evaluation that is based on commercialism of the success of this show, and that ecosystem, which is involved with respect to the financial structure of how these things are made, who invests money in them, the returns, the audience that it reaches. It's very interesting when we're working with BET Plus and speaking to executives, and one of the first meetings that we had was, we don't want to black explain in our show. Now, I've never experienced that in any broadcaster conversation, right? So there is a shorthand and there's an understanding how valuable it is to have a writing room that is representative of the people that we are talking about, which comes down to authenticity, relates to all these sort of things. Now, Jennifer, you're asking a really big question, because this country is broad and it's such a deep process to reach audiences, specifically when they haven't been reached. The welcome and the approach of broadcasters should, I believe there's a space where the two things can exist, such as commercial, financial advancement. At the same time, there's a soul that's attached to this work. There's a humanity that's tapped, whether you're making people laugh or cry. And the objective is to invest financial and creative ways to reach audiences. You can't make something and say, oh, well, it's never been done before, but we already know the demographic. We already know how to market it. You haven't done that before. So you can't just take this sort of, this square and try to put it in a round hole. Like it's a new sort of thing, which involves a lot of thinking that a lot of industry folks don't want to spend that time. They want to, yeah.
First of all, I want to say that is brilliant. No, that is a brilliant, because here's the thing. And I know I've talked to Damon as well. And one of the problems we have when we make content as Black creatives is the broadcasters, they do say things like, well, we know our Canadian audience. We know them, and your ideas, they're nice. But we know our audience and you don't. And so you never get to be a part of the conversation about how to reach those audiences, or even how to reach a white audience who would normally turn away from
Absolutely.
this content. And I think there's something lost, something significant is lost when when we are, for example, given, let's say, the funds to make a porter, and then to not be listened to not take into our point of view of, as Black creatives, having tried to reach to these audiences, you know, and some of the things that we've learned, it's never taken into consideration. So, I mean, Being Seen doesn't speak about this specifically, but I think this is a part of the conversation, that when this work is being commissioned, that the content creators, the Black and diverse content creators, should be a part of the conversation about how do you get it out there.
Need to be involved. It's critical. If it wasn't for certain interventions, the material that would come out would not have reflected what we made. And at the same time, it's like, you know, I came from an advertising world before, where a company that does, you know, toothpicks would say, hey, come and create a campaign for this. I'm not taking a campaign for, like, you know, shoes. I'm actually conceiving of a campaign that's specific to this thing. Every project is like its own entity, and it deserves that attention. Specifically, if you're trying to carve out and hype something up and say it's the first of, then it's the first of for you to actually put your mindset into a place to actually engage with the community and learn how to actually reach and engage. Because when you're saying that the audience is out there and we see people flooding in at certain moments, and then when I'm hearing that folks are like not hearing it, advertising, marketing dollars, strategy, it is still a business. We put the work in, and we need it to be seen, and we need to reach our communities.
Beautiful. You know, Melanie, I'm going to tap into you for this question, but from a slightly different point of view. You know, and I know you produce too, but you've been in content both in Canada. You've been in significant work in Canada and in the US. Is the conversation different about reaching audiences here than it is there? And in Canada, in your experience, in the roles that you've gotten, have you felt like your character, your storylines have been given the same kind of support, you know, or was there a sense that those characters could connect with an audience?
No. Is the short answer. I mean, I haven't produced in the States, so I don't know that world as well as and I've produced very small in very little in Canada. But I mean, what I would say is, like, the roles, the great example of not getting the same support is if I'm playing a character that does not have my accent. There is no dialect coach for my Trinidadian accent that I have to put on. Yes, my family's from Trinidad, but I grew up in Toronto. There was no dialect coach for my Jamaican accent that I had to, and so I had to reach out to my Jamaican friends who are actors and be like, can you please help me, so there. But if it's a British, there's a dialect coach. Orphan Black had a dialect coach, and thankfully he was able to help me with my South African accent. But I mean, he was basically there for the lead. Who had, all these different accents to do. So the support, so in that way, no, definitely. And most of the time when I'm playing the characters that I play, even if they're written for a Black person, they're written by white people. So it's seen through their lens. I in my long career, can count maybe on two hands the amount of projects that I've worked on, maybe one hand, where it's Black folks that I get to say words that are familiar to me, that reflect my essence, that reflect all of my complexities, as opposed to just like, okay, you're a stern Jamaican mama, or you're or a stern Trinidadian mama.
Strong Black women,
I know. I feel we yes, we're strong, but we're vulnerable, and we're all of that. We're all of it,
Absolutely.
you know. So
Mhm.
definitely not.
Okay.
I mean, the one thing I want to add to the talk about getting projects made and getting projects out there is diversity needs to happen with the funders. Diversity needs to happen, because I don't know how many times friends of mine have been the only Black person on the telefilm board, or that's trying, not the board, the jury that is trying to like give out this money, and so they're fighting to like give a little piece of change to productions of color. So there needs to be diversity at the top, the people that are making these decisions, like Charles is saying, talking to BET Plus, because they're Black people. It's not, you don't have to like be fighting for everything.
Yeah, it's the gatekeepers, and I think when we started this thing, this look at diversity in Canada in terms of the stream-based industry, one of my strongest points was that our gatekeepers don't reflect the Canadian population or audience, and they don't reflect from the Black communities, and that has real material consequence on every level. So I absolutely agree with you. And I'm going to jump to the next question because I want to, but thank you so much, because it's just getting that perspective. I want to talk about stereotypes that we see on screen. Gosh, this is, I mean, stereotypes. So the report goes through some of the ones that upset us the most, and some of the major problems. I guess I'm from the perspective of making, well, you know what, I realized that that Corey was supposed to join us, and I was going to ask him about, he made a feature film about a Black cop, and it looked at the police, internally, what it is like, the police system, and it's about a Black cop who is actually racially profiled. Can we talk about some of the stereotypes that we have seen that are so familiar, and from a point of view of an actor? So I'm going to go back to you, Melanie. Talk about some of the stereotypes that you've had to play, or you, Charles, as a director, that you've taken a role, you've taken the directing gig, and then you have to then direct this stereotype. Anthony, a show that you had to writing where you had to write this stereotype, and if you didn't, they wanted that stereotype. Can you talk about some of the stereotypes that you've had to live with because of the industry demanding that in terms of the content we create? I'm going to start with you, Melanie. First, any roles that you've played that were very stereotypical. Charles, anything that you directed, as a director for hire, and Anthony, as a writer and showrunner, any story you have around having to write stuff that you didn't feel comfortable with. Start with you, Melanie.
Angry Black woman. Angry Black woman. Angry Black woman. The many iterations of the angry Black woman. I have played them all. So I mean, all that I try to do when I get in there, because by the time I get in there, it's been written, it's, they have like a certain way that they want. So I just try and bring as much of my humanity to the roles. And, sometimes I'm fighting with directors. I was like, no, this person does not need to come off so angry. Why can't there feel there's love underneath there? There's a reason for that anger. Let me play with the different complexities that are part of that anger. So that, that's basically
What some of the other tropes are the Manny, and then there's the slutty Black woman. Have you done any of those?
Yeah, no. I wouldn't mind playing a slutty Black woman. I mean, like, I'm getting some, no, that hasn't been been my go-to.
Okay, I'm just curious.
I did have a nice sex scene in Rude that was like kind of lovely.
But that was luscious. That was like, was lovely.
Yes, exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And it was, you know,
A
black,
white
you
man
know.
wrote that, so you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
I think I was saying, Charles, I'm just curious about that, you know, like director for hire, for example, you know, any stereotypes that you've had to, you know, deal with, confront,
Yeah,
direct.
I'll point to a couple of things that kind of speak to, one thing that speaks to more or less the, you know, the reason why it's so important to have in those producer levels, in the production manager levels, those, you know, writing rooms, individuals creating shows that are reflective of a diverse perspective. I was working on a show once, and there was a scene that called for a woman to give birth, and there was an actual mechanical baby. And the question that I had was, is there a Black one on that we available to use? Because it affects the casting. It affects the way everyone's writing. And in the multi-years of the show, the only individual who gave birth on camera is a Caucasian woman. So that is something that is an example of something where I brought up a point, and it was a very interesting, because this was a number of years ago. It was interesting, the tone of the room and how it shifted. I was actually posing a question to find a solution that would factor into how I cast and how I have to play things. In the end, I ended up casting what I wanted to and didn't use the puppet. But the idea is that it caused individuals to, some get defensive and some to reflect. And I kind of became a problem. But anyway, and I remember specifically there was a line that, and the sort of subconscious, this sort of space where we are, there was a line in an episode where it was an actor saying, "It's a Black day." And there was one Black actor in the scene. And every time this line came out, it was directed at this one actor. This actor is amazing, someone who I recently worked with, and he felt it, and he actually spoke with me, and we addressed it, and we actually shifted that right there and then. But it was something that he felt and I felt, and also being new in that sort of director sort of space, I actually had the conversation in my head, should I say something or should I not? Although I was witnessing it happen. And I was lucky that there was an actor who actually had the confidence and the courage to speak up of what was actually happening in the moment. And we actually were able to connect. So if I wasn't there, I don't know if he would have spoke.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. I mean, it's tough stuff, you know. And I was curious from the point of view of, you know, because, you know, from the point of view of being hired to do this work, you know, where those stereotypes might come into play. That might be challenging to do, you know. Anthony, you know, again, you've written from Canada, US, the UK. In your experiences, were there stereotypes, stereotypical characters, or you were asked to write that didn't sit with you? And then you could also talk about, by the way, what are some of the stereotypes that really bug you?
I think for me, I've been very lucky that I haven't, it's obviously those stereotypes have popped up, and I've been lucky that I've been around other showrunners that when I speak up, usually something gets changed, or and it's one of those reasons I wanted to become a showrunner, so I'd have more power to make sure those stereotypes don't happen. Then what happens now is you put something in, you get notes where that people are trying to make your characters more stereotypical so that white audience members feel more comfortable with the depiction. And that's where I get to a place where you have to educate and then explain the art. So it's kind of like you don't, and this is something I talk about with the BIPOC showrunner program that I do, which is that as someone who's a person of color, you are always going to be put in a place where you have to educate the gatekeepers before you actually talk about the art you're trying to create. Like that's just the unfortunate reality of our situation when you're trying to put something out there, because the gatekeepers are usually white. We've been talking about this, and they sometimes they want to understand, they just don't understand. So you have to get to a place where you have to explain explain the history, explain why it's important, and then say that's why it's connected to this character. Like I've been in places where like legit someone has said to me, oh, but you know, some of our audience members wear All Lives Matter t-shirts and this Black character needs to change because of it. And I'm like, no, like, are you gonna make my hand write the character differently? You're not gonna do that, and it's not gonna happen. So like, there's been absolutely times when you have to kind of like, I feel like, and I tell the boot camp, you're going to be battle tested. Like, that's just, you don't have it. Like, the way we are right now, we're not where we need to be yet. You're going to be battle tested. Some of the stereotypes, I mean, I think they're in the report. The report's such a great report. Like, you know, the stereotypes we've seen, like, I'm sure Melanie and Kevin have been asked to play all of these stereotypes at some point or another.
In fact, I was going to ask Kevin. I was going to ask Kevin because he's also played a lot of cops. Kevin, you played a lot of police officers, and as a performer, again, I'm always, you know, what are some of the roles that you know, that you've gotten that inhabits, you know, these stereotypes, and what are some of the stereotypes that you've been asked to play over your career that's really bothered you or upset you, and I'm curious if you ever communicated about them, and if you know what was the result. Kevin, I don't see. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm here. It's an interesting time that we're living in now. Right, we've been talking about the post George Floyd era that we're in now, which has really given us a seat at the table and a voice that we didn't have before, right? So I'm proud of you know, my brothers, you know, Charles and Anthony, who are able to step up with stiff spines and say, no, foot in the soil, enough is enough, I'm not doing it anymore. That hasn't always been the case, right? And as actors especially, and of course as directors, as producers, as showrunners, we've been vulnerable, right? And I can only speak as an actor because I'm not fortunate enough to have moved into that space yet as a producer, as a director. I hope to at some point. But as an actor, you're at the whim of those people on the other side of that table when you walk in that room. And you're conditioned to be a pleaser, to be a yes person, right? To go in there and do whatever you can to get that role, right? Because you need to eat. You got a kid you got to feed, you got bills you got to pay, and you need to do that kind of stuff. I didn't work in film and television a whole lot as a young man because I wasn't buff, right? I wasn't in shape the way that the scripts were asking me to be in shape. You know what I mean? I wasn't a star wide receiver on the football team. I wasn't the quote unquote, we were talking about stereotypes, I wasn't the Mandingo character. Do you know what I mean? Who's going to come in and be the one to make, you know, the white girl sort of go, oh, there's another flavor. Oh, okay. You know what I mean? I wasn't that person. Yes. So now you talk about the fact that I play cops and stuff. I'm older now. There's a little bit of silver in the side of my hair. And now I play authority figures. I play doctors, lawyers, cops, military men, that kind of thing, because I've graduated to that next level in my life. But those stereotypes were always there, and we didn't have the opportunity to say, no, I will not do it, because they're like, okay, there's 6 other people who are waiting in line to do it. But now as the young cats are coming up, we're realizing that these spines are there as well. They're coming in with these spines because this is the era that we're in now, and the ball is starting to move forward. And I'm so proud of these guys who are coming up and saying, no. And it's because we have projects like The Porter. It's because we have people in positions of power like Anthony. It's because we have people who are making documentary films that we have options. We have places that we can go to say, we are not a monolith. That's what we've been talking about here. We are not a monolith. I remember as a young kid, and I talk about this all the time, whenever we went to family functions, Christmas, Thanksgiving, in the corner of the room, there was always a TV playing Cool Runnings.
Yes.
Cool Runnings was always playing in a corner somewhere. My Jamaican family was skinning teeth and laughing and joking, blah, 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 because we were on screen.
Completely.
Right? As crazy, when you look back at it, as crazy as that depiction was, Dougie Doug in an ice cream freezer breaking off dreads on his head, all that kind of stuff, we were just proud to be on screen. We were seen. Do you know what I mean? And now we're starting to say, all right, there was a TV show, and I'm going a little bit off here, but there was a TV show back in the day. It wasn't that long ago, late 80s, early 90s, called Desmond's. It was a TV show, right? And what was it about? It was about a Black family who owned a barber shop, man. And brother was just trying to raise his kids cutting hair. A pork pie was sitting there just chilling in the barber shop. And that was appointment television for us. Why? Because we were being seen. That was us. Do you know what I mean? And I go to school and my wife would be like, yo, dude, you watch Desmond's? I'm like, what you know about, and then suddenly a conversation happens, right? About what that means to our community and so on and so forth. So anyway, I've gone a little bit off the garden path a little bit, but I'm passionate about this because the stereotype still exists and they still want us to do them. The magic Negro still exists. All that kind of stuff is still there. But we at least now have the opportunity to say, no, this isn't going to happen. This isn't going to happen. I'm not going to portray it that way. Or you can audition for it, but once you get on set, you have at least the opportunity to say, no, this is the truth. This is my truth. This is who this character should be, not what's on that page, because it wasn't written by us. It's not our voice. It's not who I am. It's not who I'm going to portray. And I'm proud, and I hope that we continue to move that ball forward from this point on.
Thank you. That was brilliant. So brilliant. And you raised all the shows that we've grown up watching too, because it was like, there was nothing. And the how to express to a culture that has always been seen what it feels to never be centered, to so rarely have one person, even in the back. I wouldn't recognize the extra. I was like, oh, they got some Black extras in this show. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Sometimes that was enough back in the day. So, I mean, it's really important what you've just said. Now, this is a question, and being seen, our study looks at this. You know, there are, though, traumatic character, like our experiences, some of our experiences, look at the fact that in America, for example, Black folks, white folks are 10 times, has 10 times the wealth of Black folks, which is insane to me, 10 times, right? So that means that there is a number of our people in our community who are poor, who are not doing well, who have struggles, trauma associated with their living survival. Does that mean we stop making content that has the gangster character or the and I know Being Seen looks at this, by the way, but what are your thoughts about continuing working with authentic, true stories that are challenging? Can anyone could address that, because I think this is where it's something to think about, right? Because do we now only make stories where Black folks are middle class and upper middle class, and what? Yeah, Ngardy, anybody could jump in and tell me your thoughts about that.
I mean, I think you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not like an either or situation. We just want all of it. We just want more complexity, more different. You see a different view, a different. Sorry.
That's
a different, yes, phones off. A different viewpoint, because we're as complex as every community out there. So why aren't all of our stories being told? I mean, The Wire, yes, there were Black gangsters, but they also had Black cops, and they also showed the humanity of those gangsters. So it doesn't have to be an either or.
I think it's this dimensionality that we're talking about when we're talking about humans and representing them in our stories, and when they're narrow, one-dimensional, or there's a point of view that it's not informed to actually flesh out that character. I mean, it's not, again, I agree with Melanie saying, we can't stop just doing this work. I think there's, again, I think comes to a care to the story you're telling, and if you don't understand how to fill someone out and make them not just be the angry person, or not just be this, that we are more than that. But I understand in the realm of dramatizing, that gets lost, that people actually don't invest in those spaces when they even have a background performer. And I hate that term, background performer. It's like you are part of the cast. It's even this language that we use that actually that keeps people from investing and feeling that they're a part of something. You're part of the entire story. You're in the frame. It's like, and to actually see that we are representing human experiences, that those who are not from the sort of diaspora or the space, and when we're looking at these characters, I'm finding that there are some really intelligent, smart people who are looking at the work that they're getting from, even like I have the sound designer who hits me up and says, oh, like this is what the director's thinking. I've been having problems with the way that they want this voice of this character to sound, and they want a Black person, blah, blah, blah. And I'm trying to get them the director to kind of think differently about even the stereotype that you're putting into a robot. Like, and just, it was very interesting conversations where there are some people that are at a higher sort of space of recognizing that, that the dimensionality of who we're representing is important.
Yeah. This is my last question, and I know people are going to be going to. Okay, what do you all think, and I ask this for each and every one of you, the impact of not being seen has been on Black communities, and what do you hope for the future in terms of now broadening our voices, being like, this report is about being seen. So let's say the industry changes. What has been the impact of not being seen, and what do you think is to come in terms of where we can expand?
I think the summer of 2020 showed us what the impact of not being seen is, because for the fact that we actually had to go through that and had to explain to people what our experiences were and have been in Canada for generations, the fact that others don't know what our experience is, the fact that people are surprised that slavery existed in Canada, the fact that they are surprised that there are biases and there's systemic racism from the police force, from the education system, this anti-Black racism that we all know, we all face in our daily lives in so many different ways and insidious ways. The fact that we have to explain that in 2020 shows that people haven't been able to learn this. It hasn't been seen, it hasn't been reflected in media, it hasn't been shown. The fact that people say, well, it's Canada, so that those things don't happen here, that Trump's America is only in America, that those things don't happen in Canada, is because it's not reflected in pop culture here, it's not reflected in the media here. So we just need an abundance of our stories, abundance. We need tons of, give me 20 stories about the gangsters, but from the gangster's perspective, from his girlfriend's perspective, from the female gangster's perspective. Let's have our voices centered as the main characters, and the cast and the crew, and from the producer down, we need our perspective represented so that these nuances aren't missed, and we get these fulsome perspectives and these fulsome stories being told. Like, how many films of World War II and shows have been made of one thing, one point of history? So like, give me 20 slave stories, give me 20, I want 20 stories of Little Burgundy, give me 10 more versions of The Porter, like, give it to us all. We need an abundance, because we need to truly understand what we've been going through, and that there's just not enough of it. That's me.
Anybody else? The impact of not being seen, and where do you think this is headed?
I mean, the impact is, just what Ngardy was saying, but I think also on top of that is like how we see ourselves, right? We're being told how to see ourselves. Our children are being told how to see themselves. And for so many years, we didn't have access to how to see ourselves. The white lens was telling us, no, you're a gangster, so be a gangster. You are poor, you're dumb, be poor and dumb. And it's not until we started taking over. I think about my son when he was taking him to see Black Panther. Like, he thinks he can be a superhero now because of that, right? Like, I think that's the kind of representation, like when you see a kid feel themselves be seen, that to me is, I think, the potential impact of what will happen if we get to a place where we make things right the way they should be made. So I'm hoping that this is one of those things where 15, 20 years from now we look back and go, this was a moment in history that we did the right thing, we spun things the right way to make it better for for those ones coming up.
We changed the future.
Yeah.
Who wants to go next? I just think it's important. This is an important question. Anybody else who wants to talk about the impact of not being seen and where this is headed?
I think it starts with our youth, right? I think Anthony made a great point there. I remember as a kid, just being on the school ground, and the games that you play often were based on the television shows that you watched the night before, right? So I spent a whole lot of time playing Arnold and Willis from Different Strokes. You know what I mean? Like those were the things I had to do. I wasn't allowed to play Bo and Luke Duke. I wasn't allowed to play, you know what I mean, like Captain Stubing. I'm going way back. I'm aging myself right here, so y'all just bear with me, right? But I see some smiles around here, so like some of y'all know what I'm talking about. I lost with the Captain Stubing, I know, but still, anyway, like you form your identity based on that, right? And if you have characters on television and in films that you can aspire, like, you know, you can be a superhero, you can be an accountant, you can be a teacher, you can be a politician, you can be whatever, then you say these things are not out of my reach. These things are all attainable, and that matters. That really does matter. As the father of young men and a young girl as well, these things do matter. And I think that as we continue to do this, I just hope that we as Black people, as Black creatives, are afforded the opportunity to succeed and also to fail, right? That is the thing that we do not get the opportunity to do. There have been a litany of white shows that have been made that have been trash, right? But these guys get another chance and another chance and another chance and another chance, and eventually they hit gold, and then they fail and they fail and they fail and they fail again. But they are not held to account for all that the same way we are. And I want the ability to be able to say, you know what? All right, we may be just getting into this game right now because the door has been cracked open a little bit. Let's learn our craft. Let's figure it out. We've got good stories to tell. And just because this one failed doesn't mean you throw the entire thing away. Like Melanie said, you don't throw the baby away with the bathwater. So I want the ability to get out there, tell our story, say, okay, this one wasn't perfect, but the next one's going to be a little bit better. Give us an opportunity to go on our journey, tell our stories, find out who we are, and have that fulsomeness that we've talked about, so we can stand up and say it with our full chest and not be held back.
Oh, that was so beautiful, because that's that was brilliantly said. Who hasn't? Anybody else want to comment? By the way,
I'll just say really quickly, the impact is the robbing of imagination. Like, you know, I think ultimately it's like this form, it allows us to imagine, and it is the sky's the limit in this form. And when we can imagine, you can imagine all these other possibilities, all these other lives, these things that you can do. So I think that's been a massive impact where it's, you know, youth and to see where they are young and the imagination where they think, and then how that actually slowly, you know, disappears. So I think that's the power of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just add what everybody said, ditto, triple, whatever. But like, even like specifically me coming up, I had the straightened hair, you know, did the hairdresser thing, you know, because that's all I saw. For the few Black characters that I saw on TV, I saw you had to have the straightened hair. So I would, you know, do that. But I've always loved locks. I've always looked at locks like, oh my God, they're so beautiful. But remember thinking, I can't do that with my hair, because I play cops and I play judges and I play these authority figures, and nobody has that hair. So even like in that little way, my wanting to be natural, to go natural, was subverted, because I was like, oh no, I can't. And then finally it was a white crew person was having this conversation with, and he's like, well, I guess you'll play other kinds of characters, or you'll play different characters. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I started locking, and my career like blossomed because I was myself. I wasn't trying to, because I could never do hair. I could never do the straighten. Like, it was just horrible. So it was like, so I was always going into auditions not feeling my best. But once I started locking, I was like, this is me. I get to be me. And then, you know, suddenly I'm like, I'm playing cops. I'm playing all these authority figures, but with my natural hair, with my hair that is locked and beautiful. So yeah, and I considered myself talking to young Black actresses that were coming up. That's like, you can have your hair any way, the way it grows out of your head. You can have your hair be your hair and still make it in this industry.
So important what you just said. The only thing I wanted to add, it's I think the impact of not being seen is that we do not exist in the future. If you're not seen, you don't believe in the future. I think some of the challenges that we're having in our communities right now is because Black folks cannot imagine a future where we are significant. And so it is urgent, this work that we're doing. We shape like life, we shape future, we shape generations through content that is created. And so in my mind, the impact of not being seen is stalling the future for Black folks. Now I have to talk to so Kelly Lynne, do we still have time? Because I know that I wanted you to talk about how the directives contribute to creating authentic, inclusive content, and how the study is being rolled out. Do we have time for that?
I can go through it really quickly, and then we can go to questions, because we have to have.
Yes.
So the directives, they're intended for generally two audiences: people who need the guidance and the help to be able to work with underrepresented communities, and with the Black Report, working with Black communities and Black creatives. But it's also intended for people who are part of those communities as a tool, because as you've been talking, everybody, about the struggles that you've had, that the directives can be used as a way of saying, it's not just me. I'm not being overly sensitive. My position is shared by a whole pile of other people. And if you want to educate yourself, read the directives. So we're really hoping that people see it as a tool to make their lives easier as they go through these daily struggles of the industry. So after this Black one, we have two more coming out. 2S LGBTQIA+ will be out at the Inside Out Festival, June 5th. And then we'll be doing a People with Disabilities report launching tentatively June 22nd. And then we're going to be doing workshops and other things to help people learn how to, once they've got the concept, and this has come up in the discussion, how do they actually do it? How do they implement it? So we're going to be working on this for a while, because it's going to take time to change the world.
It really does. Thank you. Now, the important thing to also recognize about the Being Seen reports is that, and I think, Kelly Lynne said it, they all come with directives. So if you haven't read it, read it. If you feel like you can't read it, read the directives. This, I think, is crucial for anybody trying to make content about communities that they are not from. I think it's crucial for anyone who gets to make decisions about content that is made, whether you're from the community or not. This is even crucial for Black folks, for us to understand that all the pain and all the challenges, it's not in our heads, that so many of us have gone through this. This is about being seen. So I encourage everyone to contact the Black Screen Office, to support the Black Screen Office, and to read the report. And I want to say, and I'm looking at my notes here, because we are here to make long-lasting change. These reports are the culmination of a year of study, and there's more to come, and there's more work to be done. Now, before we go to questions, I want to thank all of the participants, my fellow panel members, you guys, just so great. I keep saying that as awful as George Floyd, that experience, of what we saw, as awful as some of the experience we've had, it has triggered a coming together of community. And I'm having like the best time of my career, because I get to be on panels with like Black people, and we get to share stories, and we get to actually communicate with our white counterparts and our POC counterparts and say to them what is actually happening, what is actually going on, and people are listening. So I thank each and every one of you for being on this panel and for sharing your story and for being seen with us. Now, I think there are some questions. I'm not sure who is managing the questions. Am I getting the questions, Kelly, Lynn, what's going down?
They're in the Q&A section.
Oh,
If you
okay.
go,
Okay, see, Joan and everyone will tell you, I suck at technology, but I see the Q&A section. Okay, okay, let's see here, questions. And then Kelly, please tell me when I gotta stop. And Joan, if you're there, is there anything I missed that you felt it was really important that we should talk about? Joan? Okay, I guess I'm.
Yeah, I'm here.
Is there anything I missed?
I had to find my mute button. One of the things that we're planning to do is to make this go beyond a report that's on people's shelves. We want them on people's desks, and we want them to be, actually they're online at beingseen.ca, by the way. But where the industry is taking note of these reports and are asking us, as Kelly Lynn said, for workshops and guidance on how to implement these. So one of the big things we're hoping to do is to put together a Being Seen collaborative network of decision makers, funders, broadcasters, distributors, those who are the gatekeepers and decision makers to from the top down say these directives are what we've been asking for. We don't know how to do this. And so let's start with these directives and have them, the people at the top tell their people that this is what they need. And then for us to come in and actually help them to implement it. So it's becoming, I was saying to Kelly, an industry in and of itself, because it's so needed. And there are people out there who really have a desire, but don't have a clue about where to start. And so we don't want to leave it with just the report and the written directives. We want to actually engage with people to help them to make that change.
There you go. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So again, how crucial and important this report is. Now, there's a question from an anonymous attendee for Charles. Charles, I love that you mentioned the problem with how we tend to understand audience interest. The hugest one. This is what gets used against us. Do you have any suggestions for the broadcasters to figure out how to reach out to audiences? In your opinion, what are the best ways through which we could understand the Canadian audience taste? That's a huge one. Charles, I leave it to you.
I have something too.
I'll try to give a half kind of cheeky, half informed answer. I think what we're speaking to is to better understand the audience or the broader space is in those broadcasters, in those institutions, we need people who actually understand and represent those communities and audiences. It is from I think ultimately this involves deeper engagement and meaningful representation, period. Like it's to understand what Canadian audiences are doing. I think there's various ways that we have strategies. I mean, it depends on your demographic. I mean, there's a whole youth movement, and there's Instagram that could inform you of like what people are watching and what people are interested in, and what I think there's this idea that broadcasters sit they're not proactive, and actually that it was almost like you're sitting in the same sort of space and things are coming at you, and then you're making this decision, but the individuals aren't engaged out there, or really like, at times, I'm not speaking across the board here, I'm just saying that it's not this stagnant thing where it's responsibility of broadcasters and individuals and people who greenlight projects to be out there and understanding what's going on, and that's where vision comes in, taste, because everyone's, you can have a great story, but we know that this business comes down to taste. someone's mother really loved, like, you know, Little Bears, and someone pitches them a show and they greenlight it. Like, you know, it's there's all that stuff that's involved. We're still human beings who are making these decisions on things that are so I think that it's more to me about broadening what we assume the audience is. And when you actually assume that it's like, you know, hearing a repeated thing of like, oh yeah, well, the people in Saskatoon won't watch this. I'm like, yeah, but well, what about the people in Nova Scotia? How come they're not like so that there it is, a very narrow point of view. And I think that we what would help that as well, like, yeah, I'm Canadian, but, you know, nationalist sort of perspectives or point of views or tendencies tend to be to form narrow sort of perspectives at times. I think Canada, if we think internationally, if we think broader, that we want our material and our stories to reach beyond, you know, yes, because we have people that are from the diaspora and the eastern coast west of this country, but they're back home on the islands. They're in Africa. They're all over the place. So I think that we, you know, to understand what an audience taste is, I think we should think just, you know, broaden that we're thinking a little more internationally.
Can I just add something to that?
Yes.
One of the second report that that the Black Screen Office is releasing, it's called Being Counted, Canadian Race-Based Audience Survey. So this is going to be launched in Banff, and it is a look at all of these audiences that are invisible now. There's no research. Advertisers don't know about them, marketers don't know about them or how to market to them. It's 25% of the population that's left out when we do audience ratings. We don't know what the Black Nova Scotian is watching. So we've done this deep dive survey that says, these are the people across the country. This is what they're looking for. This is what they want to watch it on. This is, you know, how they feel about representation, how they feel about stereotypes. It's like something that's never been done before, never even been contemplated before, because nobody has thought that this audience had any value. And now, in some cities, we're more than 50% of the population in urban centers. So they have to take it seriously. So we've taken a first step to write this report and hoping to get it out there as widely as possible, particularly to marketers and advertisers and certainly to broadcasters, because right now there's an opening to making this kind of content. But, you know, as Charles said, if it doesn't get marketed properly, and advertisers don't know to buy airtime, then broadcasters will literally not be able to commission anymore because there's the ecosystem isn't fleshed out yet. There's too many gaps in order for us to be successful right now.
Absolutely, we are not counted, and that is a factor. And so this is why, you know, internationally, in terms of the global market, the struggles Black folks have for their creative content. So, you know, but you know who's doing it? The Black Screen Office. And we're doing it because we understand the value of being counted. Now, another question that I thought was great, although I saw this wasn't a question, but this was to you, Kevin, just saying yes. So I just wanted to send that to you. Somebody thought you're, I had to give you that, yes. Okay, now this is from Annika Holder. And I love this question. How has the term BIPOC been helpful or worked against being seen as Black artists, writers, actors? So the term BIPOC, how has that either helped or worked against? Anybody? I can't see everybody, by the way, so just jump in. Anybody?
I also don't know. I mean, I'll be honest. Like, I mean, I'm trying to think how long I've been using that term. And I feel like I kind of started using when I moved back to Canada in like 2017, when, you know, started hearing that. And so for me, like, it was just, for me, I think it's one of those things where maybe what it's done is it's connected it's connected people of color in a way that maybe hadn't been done before. I think you were just kind of like seen as the other for for a long time. It's kind of like white, not white, you're not white,
Mhm.
So but now I feel like it's almost like we have like and I know in the UK they use these other terms, and I just feel like it's just I don't know. That's a hard thing for me to put into to quantify how it's helped or hurt. I just know I feel more community now that I'm back in Canada. I feel more community in terms of like with the people of color all around, and everyone's working to make a change.
Okay, why I love this question is this. I completely agree with you, and myself, Joan, we're part of Ngardy, we're part of various organizations that are BIPOC oriented. But I do know that when we started the Black Screen Office, we felt it was very important to distinguish that the experiences of Black people are different from many of the people of color communities, and that to be put in always in that same on that same line, as if our stories are the same, as if our experiences are the same, is actually harmful to Black folks. Because historically, for example, when they had affirmative action, and that was meant to quote unquote help Black folks, women, and particularly white women, benefited the most from those policies. And with BIPOC, some of the BIPOC communities, they are further along. They don't have the same kind of racial profiling. They don't have the same kind of criminality experiences. In fact, some of them are actually some of the highest income earners. So we felt for BSO that we really wanted to be clear about the fact that Black experiences are different, and that we, although are not founding people like the Indigenous communities, our experiences needed to be looked at on its own right. So while I am very much a part of many organizations that are BIPOC oriented, one of the things that BSO tries to do is to be very clear about why we need different, not just outcomes, but different inputs. We need different levels of funding, those kinds of things, because our experiences are not the same. So that is kind of like why I like that question, but
No, I agree. And I think it's one of those things too, where it's like, that's why it's so great about the Black Communities Report, because it's like, even within our subset, there are so many other subsets that we need to be discussing and give voice to. So yeah, and I think it's one of those terms that I feel like, yeah, I think as a Black man, as for having lived in the States and living in the Caribbean, being in the UK, I feel like it's an experience being a Black Canadian that is different than being Black anywhere else in the world, right? So I think, yeah, absolutely, it's important to see everyone in their own right and all together, cool, but everyone's got their own experiences. I think you're absolutely right.
Cool vibes. Okay, tell me guys when I got to stop, but I have more questions. I see something from Lori Townsend, a wonderful sister out there making films. Woo! It is often said that in the context of working in the industry, we should pick and choose our battles. I wonder if any of our guests have challenged the wisdom and or coined a new philosophy. Okay, so should we pick and choose our battles? Have we been challenged? Has anybody been challenged by that wisdom? Or do we just battle it all?
I think that definitely we need to pick and choose our battles, because you just be tired. Like you just be like constantly battling. So I definitely do feel that we have to. As far as like challenges that I've sort of went to, again, it's very interesting. It was about hair. It's Rookie Blue. And, I auditioned with my locks and got the role. And then as soon as I walked into the hair trailer, the hairdresser was like, so we're going to change your hair. We're going to put a weave in, or we're going to, and I'm like, what is happening? How are you putting a weave over my lock? Anyway, so I was like, why? And they were like, well, just because we just feel like that's, the look of this character. And I said, you already have a Black character, Anuka's character, who has long, straight hair. Why not show another version of what our hair looks like? And that was like mind-boggling to them. They were like, what? Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'll talk to the producers and see. And then thankfully that they were like, oh, okay. But I had to be very specific about why this character could have locks, and make my points in a very unemotional but very, thought out way. So yeah, there's many battles to.
Yes, absolutely. I'm gonna ask one last question, and this is of Kelly Lynn. Did you find anything shocking, any shocking facts that appeared out of the research? We want the tea, Kelly Lynn. Give us the tea. And I think this will be the last, I think this is the last question, because we actually have a BSO AGM that we have to go on to after this. So can you share, please?
Okay, I'll tell one story, and I wouldn't call it shocking, but it was surprising to us. We were having these LGBTQ focus groups, and they were mostly white people. And so we started trying to figure, but we were seeing people of color, LGBTQ people of color in the people of color group and in the Black focus groups. So we started asking questions like, what's going on here? And we had one guy who said to us, well, I can fake not being LGBTQ when I'm out in the world. I can't fake being Black. So it's his priority, because this is something that is just always going to be there. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is a very interesting point. I never really thought about that, actually. It's kind of like passing.
Yeah.
We all know what we're talking about here. Okay, I know we have to wrap up. There was a question from Anthony, though. Did the report include any Afro, Latinos, Hispanics of African descent? I just thought that was an important one to just throw out there.
Yes. And I think we've put them, I think they're more in the POC report. But we had a lot of Afro-Brazilians. And they made the point more than once that people are not aware that they are the dominant population in Brazil, because people tend to think that Brazil is all, light brown people. So that's one of their frustrations.
Yeah, they don't think it because they just think it. They think it because every images that is presented shows light brown, white people from that community, from that nation. So okay, so that's why they think it. Okay, so I think this wraps this. I think we're wrapping up, right, Joan, Kelly Lynn? We're wrapping up now. Again, thank you. So many people came out. Oh, Joan has something else to say.
I just wanted to remind people that the Black Report was just launched today. It's on the website beingseen.ca. And also, as Jen said, we haven't been around a long time, but we've done a lot. So we have an impact report that we've prepared that if you go to info at bso.ca, bso-ben.ca, then we'll be happy to send you a copy.
Okay, so thank you, Joan. Thank you, everybody on the panel. Thank you, those who joined. This is groundbreaking work. We are so excited to be a part of this. BSO seeks to help change the industry for the better. And we thank you for listening and for allowing us or being a part of the process. We are all being seen. So have a wonderful rest of the day. And I'm sure we'll be talking soon. Take care, everybody. Lots of loves. Woohoo!
Great stuff, Jennifer. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye, people.
And thanks to our interpreters.
Yes.
Yeah.